Hi, and welcome to Faded PB8. In today's episode, we'll be coloring a Santa Claus with a sleigh and some reindeer in the background in a snowy winter wonderland. So I'll go ahead and start from the beginning and just kind of walk you through, step by step, my thought process on choosing the colors that I chose. Thank you. So first, I just want to mention that this is an AI generated image. I think I just entered in like Santa Claus in a winter wonderland with his sleigh and some reindeer. I use a website called colorbliss.com. It's really fun to generate your own images, and I strongly suggest checking it out. You do have to pay a monthly fee, but it's honestly not too bad if you're really into coloring, and it definitely pays for itself if you're just kind of wasting money on coloring books anyway. I'm not a shill. I just really like the website. It's a lot of fun. But with AI, it's not perfect. It's really good, but it's not perfect. Sometimes hands have 6 fingers, sometimes heads are on backwards, sometimes people have 3 legs. But this image came out pretty well. But whenever you do one of these, you really want to scope out the entire drawing before, and just make sure each part is doable, and just kind of have a game plan. You don't necessarily have to like choose all your colors right away. But you want to just have an idea of what you think it's going to look like. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that I want the trees to be covered in snow. And some of the trees in the background have a lot of lines to them. And those lines are just going to kind of take away. If I do snow, like a very light gray, you're just going to end up mostly seeing those lines. And so we'll revisit this in a little bit. But I just wanted to mention that first. Now, going back to what I'm doing right now, we've got the sky. I'm just doing a light fade from light to dark as you reach the top of the page, so the horizon is slightly lighter. I think maybe I could have gone a little bit darker with the sky, after looking at the finished product, but it's still pretty good. So, generally you want to kind of start with like the background or maybe parts that aren't really going to get as much attention, and then that will help you determine how dark. Once you kind of set the tone, it'll help you choose your colors for other sections of the drawing. Now I'm doing snow, and snow is tough. Like basically anything that's very, very light is tough to do because it's hard to correct mistakes. I say in my other videos, you can always go darker if you kind of mess up. But with something like snow, you honestly can't go that much darker without it turning, gray and slushy on you. So here what I've done is I'm kind of mixing together, I actually put some warm grays down, some very, very light warm grays down to hit the highlights of the snow. Then I'm going over with a very light cool gray, and then I'm going to hit it with some very light blues. And the light blues just kind of give a slight indication of reflection of the sky, and it just makes it feel a little bit colder. And that works pretty well. So work with the lines that they give you. Each line kind of indicates a little hump or gradient from the snow just being kind of lumpy, and just hit those highlights. I'm working in my second blue marker, and then I'll come in with my third blue marker and just kind of darken up those dark areas I was talking about. And then what I think I'll do is I come back in with my cool gray and just kind of blend everything together. So those lightest colors, you start with them, then you kind of work your way darker, but then you want to kind of revisit those lighter markers to kind of bring everything back together. You just kind of blend it all. And here I am right now, just going over everything with I think my light blue, and then I kind of jump back and forth between the light blue and the light gray. I'm also using the blender marker to line up the ink. The blender marker, yes, it does blend the inks together, but really what it's meant for is lining up ink. And that works pretty well. It doesn't make a tremendous difference when you're working with really light ink that's light to begin with, but the blender marker really does help. Okay, so now I'm kind of revisiting what I started with. So I'm going over, I want all the trees to be covered in snow. But what I'm doing is for those trees in the background, I'm just coloring them in with this dark green, kind of like a pine green. And then what I'll do is I'll let the ink dry completely. And then I have a white paint marker, like a brush tip. And I'll go over those trees in the back. And so essentially what I've done is kind of erase those lines, all those little lines that the trees came with. and they'll create like a very light green with white paint marker over it. And then I'll come in with that green again, and then just hit some kind of below the branches, just to give the indication that there's snow resting on top of some of the branches, as you see with the trees that are closer to the foreground. So for each one, I wanted the indication that snow is on top of each branch. So I basically just, on the very bottom edge, just did like the dark green again. And then I went over with the cool gray to indicate snow. And then I'm applying shadow with those light blues that I had used before. So I'm staying consistent. I'm using the same markers for the snow that are in the foreground, the snow that's in the trees, and then a little bit later, the snow that's on the roof of the cabin. So here I am using that white paint marker, and you can see a little bit of the green, but it still gives the indication of snow. It's also important to think about how important is this section of the drawing. Now, like when you look at the previous, like another drawing, you'll probably spend like 5-10 seconds looking at it, and you're really not going to look at all the fine details. So if it's a tree in the background, chances are you're not really going to look at it, so the details aren't terribly important. But you still want to get it right. You want to make sure that it looks like it goes with everything. Otherwise, it really can, grab your attention negatively and kind of ruin the entire image. So here I am just kind of giving that indication of layers of branches with snow on top of each one. And that works pretty well. I let that ink dry the paint tip dry a fair bit, and then I cleaned off the marker on the blank sheet of paper to the right. So now, so I've completed all the snow, and now I'm about to do the cabin and the trees here. Now normally I choose a different palette for each section of the drawing, but I actually use the same browns for the tree and the cabin, because I kind of figured the cabin's going to be made out of wood that's probably local, so chances are it's the same type of wood, so it just made sense to make them the same colors. Not to say I couldn't go with a different color, it just makes more sense. Now there's a lot of fine lines and a lot of detail in that cabin in the front, like with the doors and stuff. And really with markers, you can only get so fine. You just won't really be able to color in everything there. I mean, unless you're, really, really being careful. But again, I'm thinking about where's the attention point. No one's really going to be looking at the door of the cabin. It's something you'll see, but your attention is going to be drawn to Santa and the sleigh, maybe the reindeer, and just the overall atmosphere. But you're not really going to look at the fine details. So I like to, you'll see that I pretty much have most of my palette picked out on this blank sheet of paper below it. And that I do that for a few reasons. Number one, it's good to plan ahead, just have an idea of what everything's going to look like. Second, it takes time to find your markers. If you have a very large marker collection, it probably took me like 20 minutes to choose out all those markers that you see. And once the ink hits the paper, it really starts to dry. So you just want to be ready, because we generally like to work with wet ink. So don't be digging through your markers collection as the ink is drying. Just plan ahead and get them all out. And the third reason is I don't like to use the same colors for different sections. Unless it makes sense. But, the reindeer is going to be a different brown from the trees. It's going to be a different brown from the sleigh. It's going to be a different brown from Santa's pants. And I'm just trying to keep it all unique, unless it needs to kind of go together, like the tree bark and the cabin, which made sense. So these reindeer, I basically just used 3 different markers, and 3 markers is a really good combination. It really depends on the surface area of the object you're working on. The larger the surface area, the more markers you can fit in. But 3 is a pretty good number. You can do a lot of stuff with 3 markers. You can do a lot of stuff with 2 markers, really. But we really want to avoid being monotone at all costs. So you'll notice here with this sleigh with the red part, I started off with my lightest marker, and I decided it was a little bit too light. So I went in with a slightly darker red as kind of like a base color. But now I'm using 80-pound paper, which kind of requires you to do at least 2 different layers. So I actually kind of like to start with a very light layer and then come in with a slightly darker color to do the second layer. And I guess there's a few reasons why. Number one, it's better you want to try to use like all your markers in your collection. Otherwise, you're just gonna, if you just keep using the same colors over and over and over, you're gonna end up running out of those colors, and then you'll be left with half a collection. And chances are the markers you're left with are the markers that you don't really use as often. So to preserve ink for the better markers, it's better to kind of mix together similar colors, and that way all your markers will kind of dry up, together. In the ideal world, all your markers run out in the very last drawing that you ever do, but that will never happen. If you're like me, you've bought several sets, you replace, the good sky blue, the good sand color, the good skin color, the tree bark. There are some colors you just use a lot more. And some colors, like a dark purple, like I almost never use. So in my collection, I have like probably 5 of this dark purple color that I barely ever touch, and I've got like one sand brown. So kind of coming back to the drawing here, these the sleds are pretty thin, so I can really only get about 2 markers in there. But that's fine. I mean, I'm just trying to create an indication of some light and some shadow. I'm not being monotone. At all costs, I'm avoiding being monotone. The only things I'm really monotone for here are maybe the stars on the top of the trees, which I'm doing right now. And even those lights that are on the cabin, I use 2 or 3 different colors for those. So I'm just really avoiding being monotone. I suppose I was monotone for the reef and maybe parts of the tree, but that's about it. Presents were fun. It's nice that you can choose different colors for presents, and you can't really have a wrong answer. You just want to make sure that the darkness matches its surroundings. And there's an easy way to do this if you use Ohuhu's new coding system. Basically, the last digit or 2 digits of any marker is going to be a 0 through a 16. 0 being extremely light, 16 being very dark. Basically, you want everything to kind of end with similar numbers. So if that green that I put down for the present, it ended in an 11. Those reds that I used ended in like a 12 or a 13. The browns ended with, again, like a 12 or a 13. So that helps them all look like they go together. So here I'm coming in and doing Santa, all the white parts of Santa, his beard and the jacket. And I kind of use a very light, I'm using Copic grays, the cold grays, but I'm also mixing in a very light yellow and a very light blue to kind of help match the snow a bit. And then, I wasn't too set. I thought I went a little too yellow, and what I did was I kind of came in with a darker cold gray than I intended. I only intended to go to cold gray 2, maybe cold gray 3, but I ended up going up to cold gray 4, and that makes the yellow and that blue that I used kind of, it gives the illusion that they are lighter than they really are if you surround it with darker colors. The pants and everything are pretty straightforward. Again, just using different browns than I used before. You can also mix together different browns, and they'll just give you a completely unique color. So I definitely suggest venturing off and getting away from using the same family for everything, unless it's kind of like a small area that's fairly simple. Maybe I could have thrown a touch of orange into his pants and for a highlight area. But, it looks pretty good the way it is. And again, you just got to think about the focus point. Where's your attention going to be drawn? How much detail do I need to be? And also be consistent with the amount of detail that you put in. I recently saw, on Instagram, someone posted, it was like a cheeseburger, and it was moderate detail for the burger, the cheese, the lettuce, but then they went all out on the sesame seed bun. And there was just so much more detail on the bun than there was in everything else that it just didn't look like it matched. It didn't go together. So you want to kind of keep the level of detail consistent. If you're going for a cartoony look, keep everything as a cartoony look. If you're trying to be realistic, make everything look realistic. So that actually wraps up this image. I hope you learned something. Feel free to comment below what you think, or if you learned anything, or if you have any suggestions for me moving forward. I really love to hear your commentary or your feedback. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.